What if the foundation of your constitutional rights depended entirely on your ability to remember your obligations?
Hmm.
We often focus, and rightly so, on what the Constitution gives us, the fundamental rights, the guaranteed freedoms.
Of course.
But the truth is, the architecture of our republic, it requires a balance. If you're guaranteed protection, what are you required to give back?
And that moment of realization when you shift focus from receiving rights to, fulfilling obligations, that is the essence of mature citizenship. We are diving into that demanding side today, the often overlooked and critically important area of citizen responsibility, specifically Part 4A of the Constitution and the 11 fundamental duties.
So we're exploring not just what these duties are, but the whole political and historical rationale behind their very creation.
Exactly.
We'll examine why they were inserted into the Constitution during, well, one of the most tumultuous periods in Indian history, what they mean for policy, and crucially, why internalizing this constitutional balance is just non-negotiable for anyone aspiring to serve this country.
Especially if you're navigating the depth required by the UPSC examination.
Absolutely.
Our mission is to understand that balance required for a functioning republic. This isn't just theory. We are linking these moral codes directly to the enforceable legal framework of fundamental rights and the aspirational goals of the directive principles of state policy.
And speaking of that mission, if you are tuning in right now for this essential deep dive into the core concepts of Indian polity, you know the intensity and the quality we bring to this material.
We really try.
We aim to ensure you walk away not just knowledgeable, but truly capable of synthesizing these complex constitutional themes.
Yeah.
So, if you are benefiting from the depth of this content, we humbly ask you, the listener, to consider subscribing to the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel right now.
Please do.
Hit that like button, and please take a moment to leave a comment below, letting us know which part of Indian polity or perhaps these duties you found most confusing before we unpack this deep dive.
Yeah.
Your immediate support is genuinely crucial.
It really is.
It helps us continue producing this high-quality, specialized content completely free for the entire community.
And let me just offer a sincere shout-out and immense gratitude to all our existing members, our dedicated legends. Your invaluable, consistent commitment makes these intense multi-hour research and synthesis sessions possible.
It truly does.
Your support, it fuels our ability to democratize quality education for these crucial, complex subjects. So thank you.
Now, a quick resource update, because we know this material requires immediate review.
Right.
Free notes covering this exact topic, complete with practice. Previous year, questions PYQs related to these constitutional concepts are available immediately on our Telegram channel. The link is in the description.
Go grab them.
Go grab them right away.
And for those legends who seek that decisive edge in their preparation, premium notes featuring additional PYQs, high-level analysis, and detailed model mains answers. I mean, the structure and depth required to ace the mains examination
That's the key.
are accessible on our Discord channel. That's premium access for our valued YouTube members.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is a targeted, UPSC-focused summary derived primarily from Chapter 10 of M. Laxmikanth's Indian Polity, 8th edition, the fundamental duties. We will extract the crucial knowledge nuggets necessary not just to memorize Article 51A, but to understand its constitutional context, its controversial history, and its contemporary relevance.
We have to move beyond rote memorization. We are examining the philosophical pillars of citizen responsibility as laid out in Part 4A.
Right.
We're linking them to the nature of our borrowed Constitution and its unique blend of enforceable rights and non-enforceable ideals. We need to analyze this part of the Constitution as a political response to a specific historical crisis.
And we're doing this through the lens of governance. Understanding duties is central to answering governance and socioeconomic policy questions.
Absolutely.
For instance, questions about poverty elimination, the objectives of crucial legislation like the Food Security Bill, or even judicial decisions regarding environmental protection. All these ultimately rely on the state acting on the principles of social welfare, the DPSP, and citizens fulfilling their moral and social responsibilities, the fundamental duties.
And that nexus, where the state's welfare aspirations meet citizen commitment and civic vigilance, that is the key to advanced constitutional understanding.
I couldn't agree more.
It is essential to grasp the interdependence of these parts of the Constitution for success in both prelims and mains.
Let's start with the constitutional locus, but let's immediately contextualize it historically. Where exactly do these fundamental duties sit And why weren't they in the original Constitution?
Okay, so they reside in the Constitution under Part 4A, which consists of the single, specific Article 51A.
Just one article.
Just one. And the reason they weren't original is profound. The framers were, primarily concerned with securing the rights of a newly liberated populace against a potentially oppressive state.
Right, that makes sense.
Hence the detailed list of fundamental rights in Part 3. The duties were seen as, well, implicit or perhaps as covered by the directive principles.
But history demanded they be made explicit. So when, and under whose recommendation, did Part 4A finally arrive?
It was a direct response to the political climate of the 1970s. Fundamental duties were introduced by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976.
The so-called mini-constitution.
That's the one. And this amendment was enacted during the internal emergency, which led critics to view it as an overreach by the ruling party.
And it was based on a committee's recommendation, wasn't it?
It was based entirely on the recommendations of the Swaran Singh Committee.
That committee is a crucial fact for our listeners. What exactly did the Swaran Singh Committee recommend regarding duties?
The committee felt that in a newly formed democracy where rights were being so vigorously protected, it was high time to incorporate a chapter on duties to create a true sense of balance.
A bit of give and take.
Precisely. They stressed that citizens, while enjoying their rights, should realize they also have duties to perform. They initially recommended only 8 duties.
Only 8, but we ended up with 10 duties in 1976, and now we have 11. So the original 42nd Amendment added 10. What was the catalyst for that final edition?
Right. The 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 added the 11th duty.
Yeah.
This was Article 51AK, which linked directly to the right to education.
Oh.
It mandates that a parent or guardian must provide opportunities for education to their child or ward between the ages of 6 and 14 years. This amendment essentially completed the loop.
It put the onus on the parents.
Exactly. It put the onus of securing the newly enforced fundamental right to education, which is Article 21A, partially onto the parents as a civic duty.
So this historical context, from the post-emergency push for citizen discipline in '76 to the specific linkage with education in 2002, it shows that the duties are not static. They evolve.
They do. They evolve with the nation's priorities. In summary, they were added to provide a necessary balance. As the source material puts it, the Constitution initially focused heavily on individual rights and state aspirations, the DPSP. But Part 4V specifies the 11 duties that define the minimum standard of expected responsible conduct from the citizen.
Let's dedicate some serious time to the content now. The previous draft of this deep dive only listed 4 duties, which simply isn't enough for the UPSC.
No, not at all.
We need to enumerate and analyze all 11 duties under Article 51A, maybe grouping them by theme to make it easier to remember.
That's a great idea. Let's group them into 4 thematic areas: the nation and its symbols, national service and integrity, social and cultural harmony, and lastly, environment and civic responsibility.
Excellent. Let's start in the foundational duties related to the national structure.
Okay, so these are the first few duties in 51A. First, 51A. To abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem.
The bedrock.
This is the bedrock, demanding respect for the state structure and symbols. Then, 51AB. To cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired the national struggle for freedom.
That's a really profound one. It's historical, moral.
It is. It's a duty to remember the principles of justice, liberty, and equality that drove our independence movement. And third in this group, 51AC. To uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India.
The non-negotiable promise of loyalty.
Absolutely. Placing the security of the nation above any parochial or individual interest.
So those 3 set the standard for loyalty and respect. Now, what about the duty to defend the nation and serve the country?
That brings us to 51AD. To defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so.
So this one implies actual physical contribution.
This is the one duty that directly implies it, yes. It recognizes that citizenship sometimes requires sacrifice, particularly in times of war or national emergency. And this links back powerfully to the emergency provisions we're going to discuss later.
Right. Moving on to social responsibility. How did the duties promote harmony and culture?
This is a complex area and so vital in a country as diverse as India. First, you have 51AE, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India.
And it goes further, doesn't it?
It does. Transcending religious, linguistic, and regional or sectional diversities, to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women.
So it's multi-layered. It addresses internal divisions and explicitly demands gender respect.
Correct. And then 51AF. To value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. This acknowledges India's unique ancient civilization and places the burden of its maintenance squarely on the citizens.
It's not just a state function, then.
Not at all. It's a civic necessity.
The next two, 51AG and AG, are perhaps the most vital for contemporary governance and judicial activism, especially concerning the environment and scientific progress.
Absolutely. 51AG is to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures.
And this is where the duty intersects most forcefully with fundamental rights.
Yes, the courts frequently use this duty to interpret the scope of Article 21, the right to life, when they're dealing with pollution and ecological degradation. We often see judges asking citizens to fulfill this duty.
And 51A deals with the rational temperament of the citizen.
It does. 51A. To develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform, this duty is a powerful call to rational thought, demanding that the citizen resist superstition and embrace scientific reasoning.
A direct constitutional commitment to modern values.
That's a good way to put it.
Finally, what about the remaining three duties focused on public property and achievement?
Okay, so we have 51AI, to safeguard public property and to abjure violence. A very practical and immediate duty, relevant during protests and periods of social unrest. Then 51AJ. To strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavor and achievement.
The aspirational duty.
It is, demanding personal best, whether in governance, sports, or scholarship. And finally, 51AK. As we noted, the 11th duty, added in 2002, to provide opportunities for education by the parent or guardian to his child.
Or ward between the age of 6 and 14 years. That detailed enumeration shows the sheer breadth of expected responsible conduct. I mean, it is the comprehensive checklist of ideal Indian citizenship.
It is. The source material emphasizes that while citizens are enjoying their rights, they must be quite conscious of duties they owe to their country, their society, and to their fellow citizens.
That duality is the heart of it all.
It is. The Constitution grants the shield of the fundamental rights, but simultaneously expects active participation and adherence to civic ideals through the obligations of the fundamental duties. They define the quid pro quo.
Right.
The necessity of duties is what distinguishes a responsible, participatory democracy from a purely self-serving, individualist system.
I mean, if every citizen solely demands rights without acknowledging the responsibilities that underpin the maintenance of those rights,
The whole structure collapses.
eventually, yes.
Yeah.
The introduction of these duties was a political and constitutional attempt to avert that collapse, ensuring that individual pursuit of rights does not lead to anarchy or social disintegration.
Now we come to the most important legal characteristic, which fundamentally distinguishes FDs from fundamental rights, the concept of enforceability.
Okay, let's state the core feature clearly.
That's right. The fundamental duties are legally categorized as non-justiciable in nature. They reside firmly in the realm of moral and civic obligation.
But this non-justiciable status is often misinterpreted as meaning they have, no legal weight whatsoever. Is that true?
That is the oversimplification we absolutely must correct for the UPSC audience. While they are not directly enforceable, meaning you cannot move the Supreme Court to force someone to develop scientific temper.
Right.
Parliament can and has created specific laws to enforce certain duties indirectly, turning those moral duties into legal obligations.
Okay, so give us an example of Parliament providing teeth to a moral duty.
The prime example is the duty to respect the Constitution and national symbols, 51AA. The Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act, 1971, makes disrespect to the national flag, national anthem, or the Constitution a punishable legal offense.
So it becomes a crime.
Precisely. Similarly, aspects of the duty to protect public property, which is 51AI, are enforced through the Prevention of Damage of Public Property Act, 1984. So, while the duty itself is non-justiciable, the violation of laws passed to implement it is highly justiciable.
That clarification is essential. They are moral guideposts that Parliament can choose to underpin with criminal law. Now, let's connect this feature to the DPSP.
The non-justiciable nature immediately links them conceptually to the directive principles of state policy, or DPSP in Part 4.
Articles 36 to 51.
Right. Article 37 declares that DPSP, while non-enforceable, are nonetheless fundamental in the governance of the country, and it is a duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws.
This establishes the Constitutional Balancing Act, enforceable rights, FRS, non-enforceable state ideals, DPSP, and non-enforceable citizen ideals, FDs. The DPSP, as the source material notes, constitutes a very comprehensive economic, social, and political program for a modern democratic state, aiming to realize the ideals of the preamble and establish a welfare state.
However, this non-justiciable status for the state's duties immediately drew those famously scathing critiques. Let's revisit those, as they perfectly frame the later philosophical status of fundamental duties.
K.T. Shaw's assessment was certainly memorable.
Indeed. K.T. Shaw called them pious superfluities, which suggests they are just unnecessary moral additions.
Right.
His powerful economic analogy compared them to a check on a bank, payable only when the resources of the bank permit.
Which implies that the state could just defer implementation forever by claiming lack of resources or political capacity.
Indefinitely. A beautiful promise with no guarantee of fulfillment. And T.T. Krishnapari's description went even further in its disdain.
What did you say?
He described them as a veritable dustbin of sentiments.
A dustbin of sentiments. Wow.
Yeah. This critique highlights the fear that the directives were just a collection of unorganized, feel-good ideas dumped into the Constitution without any real expectation or mechanism for rigorous implementation.
And the political scientist Casey Ware's assessment.
Ware saw them as mere moral homily, like a sermon for the government or a manifesto of aims and aspirations.
Okay, so the key takeaway from all these critiques is that if the state's solemn duties, the DPSP, are non-binding moral ideals,
then the citizens' duties, which share that non-justiciability, are rooted in the same moral imperative. Their value lies in influencing legislation and civic culture, not judicial compulsion.
But there's a critical difference in how FDs function compared to DPSP in court.
Right.
Courts can enforce DPSP, but they frequently use FDs to interpret fundamental rights.
That is the deep analytical insight required for Mains. The Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that although FDs are non-justiciable, they are a vital constitutional tool. Courts use them as an interpretive aid when determining the constitutionality of a law or when defining the scope of a fundamental right.
Can you provide a specific example of this judicial guidance?
Look at 51 AG, the duty to protect and improve the natural environment. In landmark cases, the Supreme Court has read this duty alongside Article 21, the right to life, to declare that the right to a decent, pollution-free environment is an integral part of the right to life.
I see.
By placing a duty on the citizen to protect the environment, the court is strengthened in its ability to restrict the harmful actions of both the state and other citizens to protect that environment. The duty gives moral weight to the right.
That is the true power of the FDs. They provide the ethical context for judicial decisions. Now, let's pivot entirely to the absolute counterpoint, the fundamental rights in Part 3.
Unlike duties in DPSP, rights are constraints on the state, demanding legal enforceability, and this enforceability is guaranteed by Articles 32 and 226. If your fundamental right is violated, you have an inherent right to petition the highest courts for redressal.
Let's quickly review the specific features of FRs to reinforce this dichotomy. First, the availability of rights.
Crucial distinction here. Rights guaranteed under Article 19, the 6 freedoms, are available only to citizens and shareholders of a company.
But not to foreigners.
Explicitly not available to foreigners or legal persons like corporations. However, rights like Article 21 are available to persons, which includes non-citizens.
And focusing on Article 19, let's remind listeners of the change here.
Article 19 originally contained 7 rights, but the right to acquire, hold, and dispose of property was deleted by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978.
Right.
The remaining 6 freedoms are subject to reasonable restrictions, but only on the specific grounds mentioned within Article 19 itself, demonstrating how the state's power is explicitly curtailed here, unlike the state's discretion with DPSP.
And then there's Article 21, the powerhouse of rights, which has been dramatically expanded by the judiciary. And this expansion itself is often guided by the spirit of the DPSP and FDs, though the rights remain fully enforceable.
The Supreme Court's interpretation of life under Article 21 goes far beyond just mere animal existence. It has been interpreted to include the right to live with human dignity, right to livelihood, right to decent environment.
Linking back to 51.
Linking back to 51 AG, exactly. Also the right to shelter, right to health, and crucially, the right to privacy.
Wait, so if the right to a decent environment is part of Article 21, and we have a duty to protect the environment in 51 AG, doesn't that create an interesting dilemma?
How so?
Well, if a citizen fails in their duty to protect the environment, they might be simultaneously infringing on another citizen's enforceable right to a clean life.
That is the Constitutional Highwire Act. The existence of the duty justifies the enforcement of the right.
Ah, I see.
The judiciary, through its power of review, can effectively police the duties through the enforcement of corresponding rights. It forces a realization that the health of the republic relies on something beyond the legal minimum.
It demands self-enforcement.
And a choice by the sovereign citizen to be responsible.
Let's transition now into how these moral duties and non-justiciable principles translate into concrete policy implementation and governance challenges.
Good idea.
We need to connect the abstract duties of promoting common brotherhood or striving for excellence directly to the socioeconomic framework that the UPSC tests.
This is the intersection of policy and principle. The fundamental duties provide the necessary social foundation for the state to successfully execute its DPSP obligations, which are the core of the welfare state.
Okay, so let's look specifically at the challenges referenced in the sources.
Let's do it.
Take the issue of food security and malnutrition. This is clearly a state duty derived from DPSP, right?
Yeah.
Article 47 on public health.
Yes.
Where does this citizen's duty come in?
Well, the goal of eliminating hunger and malnutrition is a core welfare state objective. The effective implementation of massive programs like the Food Security Bill faces colossal challenges. Logistics, transparency, leakage.
Right,
Corruption. This is where the aspirational duty, 51AJ, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity comes into play.
So the citizen duty to strive for excellence translates into efficient and honest participation in the welfare mechanism.
Precisely. If citizens and those administering the program uphold the duty to excellence, the implementation gaps would narrow. Furthermore, the duty to promote common brotherhood, 51AE, implies the prevention of hoarding or illicit diversion of essential resources meant for the poor.
So the integrity of the welfare state is a mutual responsibility.
Exactly. Linking DPSP's duty to provide with FD's duty to uphold fairness.
Let's look at land reforms and poverty alleviation. This was an early and massive historical state action driven by DPSP.
Land reforms are the archetypal example of the state actively seeking to establish social and economic justice, as mandated by the directives. Historically, states passed laws to abolish intermediaries and redistribute land,
which required the state to apply principles in making laws under Article 37.
Correct. But the success of this massive undertaking relied on the citizens respecting the ultimate goal of equality and justice, tying back to the spirit of common brotherhood, 51AE, and the pursuit of national ideals, 51AB.
So the socioeconomic transformation was constitutional, but its smooth realization was dependent on civic willingness to accept the change.
Exactly. When the state takes radical measures to reduce economic disparities, citizens must uphold the broader principles of the republic. This includes the duty to develop scientific temper, 51A.
Meaning accepting change based on rational principles.
Meaning accepting change based on rational principles of social justice, rather than reacting with traditional resistance or, violence, which is forbidden by 51AI.
Moving to national security and governance, the duty to protect unity and integrity is crucial in the context of India's internal security challenges. I'm thinking border management with South Asia and Myanmar.
Yes. The constitutional duty to protect unity and integrity, 51AC, places a profound obligation on citizens to uphold national security awareness. Internal security challenges, like left-wing extremism, are often fueled by local grievances,
which can be related to the non-implementation of tribal welfare provisions,
which are DPSP objectives. It all connects.
So, in a conflict zone, the citizen's duty isn't just to be loyal, but to actively cooperate with security forces and prioritize the nation over extremist ideology.
Yes, it requires active support for national security measures and vigilance against internal threats to the Union. And this is reinforced by the underlying structure of the Union itself, which dictates the citizen's primary loyalty.
Let's delve into that structural aspect. How does the nature of the Indian Federation reinforce the duty to the nation over, say, a local identity?
Our Constitution is quasi-federal, having exceptionally strong unitary features. Article 1 describes India as a union of states, a phrase chosen deliberately to avoid the implication of a voluntary agreement between states.
And this signifies two things.
two things that reinforce the citizen's duty to the Union. First, the Federation is not the result of an agreement, and second, no state has the right to secede.
Hence the powerful concept of an indestructible union of destructible states.
That's the key analytical phrase. Unlike the U.S., the Indian Parliament can unilaterally change the area, boundaries, or name of any state simply by passing a law with a simple majority.
A simple majority. That's a huge power.
It is. And this strong unitary feature underlies the citizen's primary and non-negotiable duty to the Union 51AC above any provincial loyalties.
And the ultimate constitutional test of this loyalty has to be the emergency provisions. This is where rights are restricted for the sake of the state's very existence, which citizens have a duty to protect.
The emergency provisions, specifically the national emergency under Article 352, represent that constitutional priority shift. The state's integrity takes precedence over individual freedoms in a crisis.
What happens specifically to the 6 fundamental rights under Article 19 during a national emergency?
Article 358 is crystal clear. The 6 fundamental rights under Article 19 are automatically suspended immediately upon the proclamation of a national emergency based on war or external aggression.
No separate order required.
None. The state is temporarily freed from the restrictions imposed by Article 19.
But what about accountability for those actions later, once the crisis passes?
This is a constitutional hammer blow. Article 358 stipulates that legislative and executive actions taken during the emergency related to that emergency cannot be challenged later, even after Article 19 automatically revives.
Wow.
This provision dramatically underscores the priority given to state preservation and provides the ultimate legal context for the citizen's duty to uphold national sovereignty and integrity.
So the protection of the state's existence is the prerequisite for the existence of individual rights.
At the end of the day, yes. This shows that the constitutional architecture is fundamentally geared towards state preservation in crisis, reinforcing the gravity of the duty to maintain sovereignty and integrity mentioned in Article 51A. It's the ultimate display of the supremacy of the Union.
We've established that fundamental duties are morally binding, yet legally non-enforceable unless Parliament steps in. So what mechanism ensures that the high ideals and the very structure of the Constitution are respected, especially regarding the protection of rights against the state?
That mechanism is the independent judiciary and its adoption of judicial review. Since the Constitution is supreme, not the Parliament, judicial review is the instrument that checks legislative or executive overreach.
How does judicial review in India differ from, say, the UK?
Well, in the UK, Parliament is sovereign, so judicial review is limited. In India, the Constitution is the ultimate sovereign. Judicial review empowers both the Supreme Court and the High Courts to declare laws enacted by Parliament or the state legislatures void if they contravene any provision of the Constitution, particularly fundamental rights.
So the courts act as the sentinel.
The sentinel on the qui-vive, the vigilant defender of the supreme law of the land.
And we noted earlier that this power of judicial review is increasingly used to integrate fundamental duties into the interpretation of fundamental rights, like with the environmental duty.
That's right. Judicial review ensures that governance adheres to the constitutional text, and by extension, the spirit of the duties. If a law violates a right, it can be struck down.
But if a law helps enforce a duty?
The court is more likely to uphold it, viewing it as promoting the constitutional ideal. For example, a law that enforces mandatory public sanitation, linking to 51 AGH, is often upheld because it promotes both the environment and scientific temper.
This emphasizes the structural difference. There are immense legal mechanisms to protect individual rights, but the enforcement mechanisms for individual duties are left largely to the political process and moral conscience.
Exactly. Let's look specifically at the procedural tools available for rights enforcement, the writs. This further highlights the contrast with non-enforceable duties. We need to be clear about the difference between the Supreme Court and High Court writ jurisdictions.
The Supreme Court's power under Article 32 is often called the heart and soul of the Constitution. Why is that?
Well, the Supreme Court under Article 32 is constituted as the ultimate defender and guarantor of the fundamental rights. It can issue writs habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, quo warranto, but only for the enforcement of fundamental rights.
And the remedy is itself a right.
Critically, the remedy under Article 32 is itself a fundamental right. This means the Supreme Court may not refuse to exercise its writ jurisdiction if a fundamental right is violated. It is compulsory and narrow in scope.
So Article 32 is a mandatory check on the state solely for rights. What about the high courts under Article 226?
The High Court has a wider writ jurisdiction. It can issue writs not just for the enforcement of fundamental rights, but also for any other purpose.
So for ordinary legal rights.
For ordinary legal rights, like contractual or statutory rights. However, the remedy under Article 226 is discretionary. A high court may refuse to exercise its writ jurisdiction.
Even if a legal right is violated.
Correct. Whereas the Supreme Court cannot refuse a valid Article 32 petition related to FRs.
The existence of these powerful specialized tools, particularly Article 32, which is an enforceable right to enforce your right, stands as the definitive legal contrast to the complete lack of direct enforcement mechanisms for citizen duties under Article 51A.
It confirms the inherent philosophical division. Fundamental rights are the legal shield demanding protection. Fundamental duties are the moral compass demanding conscience and civic responsibility. The former must be legally defensible. The latter must be morally inherent, though Parliament can and does step in to enforce certain aspects for the greater good of the Republic.
We've covered extensive ground today, linking constitutional philosophy, history, and governance.
To summarize the core takeaway, fundamental duties, residing in Part 4A, provide the moral and ethical roadmap for citizenship. They were introduced historically to balance the heavy focus on rights. And while they're non-justiciable, like the DPSP, they are far from irrelevant. They form the crucial bedrock of civic culture, they act as a powerful interpretive aid for the judiciary, and in certain cases have been given legal teeth by Parliament.
They are the expectation of responsibility that gives substance to the guaranteed freedoms.
Beautifully put.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you in your preparation? I think realizing that constitutional governance is a continuous spectrum, from the ironclad protection of rights to the aspirational framework of state and citizen duties, is absolutely essential for advanced analysis. You must be able to articulate the political context, Swaran Singh, 42nd Amendment, and the judicial significance, like using FDs to interpret Article 21, behind these enforcement differences.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider as you wrap up this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We learn that the government is often criticized for failing to implement the socio-economic ideals of the DPSP because they are non-justiciable. Since the citizens' fundamental duties are also non-justiciable, does the successful functioning of our welfare state ultimately depend not on legal compulsion,
but on the citizens' moral commitment?
On the citizens' moral commitment to voluntarily uphold those duties, and in doing so simultaneously create the political pressure necessary to demand that the state also fulfills its non-justiciable welfare obligations.
It's a profound question about the ultimate responsibility for democracy. Does the moral imperative on the citizens strengthen the moral case against the non-performing state?
The answer lies in realizing that citizenship is an active verb.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us for this crucial, expanded deep dive. We hope you feel thoroughly equipped with a nuanced understanding of Part 4VA and its relationship to the broader constitutional framework.
We really hope so.
Remember to please hit the like button, share your valuable comment below about the importance of FDs, and if you found this content useful, to subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel right now. We rely on your support to keep this content coming.
And if you are capable and find this depth of analysis indispensable for your journey, please gently consider supporting the channel by joining our paid membership, the Legends membership, which ensures the continuity and quality of this essential educational content.
Don't forget your resources. Free notes and practice PYQs covering this material are waiting for you right now on the Telegram channel.
And premium notes with extra PYQs and detailed model mains answers are ready for our Legends on the Discord channel. Go forth, study hard, internalize those duties, and contribute to the strength of the Republic. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.